Good afternoon, good morning, and welcome to this, the 45th now broadcast of Overdose and Chill Live. We are joined today by Ali Afzalirad from BigCommerce. And I think for the first time I pronounced it correctly, and as someone who's grown up in this world, having my last name butchered, I'm sure you can appreciate that that was an effort.
I sincerely appreciate it. Did a great job. Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining us today. For folks who are tuning in across YouTube, Facebook, or LinkedIn, by all means, any questions, comments, drop them in the chat, and we will get to them along the way. So where are you calling in from?
I'm in my home office here in Mobile, Alabama. So it's a little room
nice.
above my garage, and this is kind of where I live, basically, now since COVID hit.
Which sort of segues into how I like to open these days, which is asking a little segment I call Living La Vida Local. So I'm curious, during this pandemic, currently, what are you streaming, and any favorite delivery foods?
Ooh, okay. What am I streaming? Right now, The Handmaid's Tale is back on, so we're streaming The Handmaid's Tale. That's pretty good.
Okay.
Mare of Easttown on HBO. And I guess the question is, what haven't we streamed? I feel like we've watched everything and almost got to the point of there's no more content. So it's on HBO. We're streaming it or have streamed it. Most of the stuff on Netflix, but that's what we're watching right now. And also a really cool documentary. There's a cool documentary on HBO about kind of America and the origins and what we did to the indigenous people. I won't go into it. It's a little depressing, but it's a good one. So check that out if you get a chance.
Okay. We just wrapped up a really interesting one on Netflix called Dinosaur 13.
Never heard of
it. Which is, neither had I until it popped up as sort of a featured documentary. It is about the largest or the most complete Tyrannosaurus Rex skeleton ever found, somewhere up in the Badlands or Black Hills of South Dakota. And there is, after they discovered this thing in 1990 or 92, there ensues a pretty dramatic legal battle between the indigenous tribes of South Dakota, the US government, and this sort of fossil hunting crew out there. So I recommend it. It's really moving. It's really disturbing. I mean, disturbing. It's upsetting that this is sort of how it went, but it's captivating. So Dinosaur 13, check it out.
That's awesome. I love that. There's another one on HBO that's about, forget the name of it, but basically about hustles that are happening, right? And they're looking at, WeWork, for instance, is one episode, hour and a half or hour, focused completely on the whole WeWork saga, which is pretty interesting. And there's a series of these folks that have hustled people over time. That's kind of a neat one too.
Cool.
I'll have to, can't remember the names. See how good I am at remembering names. It's not happening.
And then food. What are you ordering these days?
We're cooking a lot at home, and I'm just trying to think. What's the last thing I ordered on Grubhub? The last thing we ordered on Grubhub, my daughter likes Popeyes. She's 10 years old. She loves Popeyes fried chicken. I love the way it tastes. I don't love what it does to me. It's delicious, but it's not good for me. And that's the last thing that we ordered from a delivery service was Popeyes. But other than that, I mean, we've been pretty much grilling here at the house or trying new dishes, and HelloFresh. We've HelloFresh, and that's the thing now. Duck à l'orange from HelloFresh.
I finally discovered Instacart. I never used it, and it's sort of a game changer, whether it's Instacart or Peapod up here, Amazon Prime stuff locally. Cool. All right, so Mobile, Alabama, or thereabouts.
Yeah.
I know we met for the first time 5 years ago, roughly, sometime back in my early days in the ecom space. I think you were the first person in the tech space that I met from Alabama, from Mobile. I'm curious, is there sort of a burgeoning tech hub there, or is it just you alone in Mobile running the tech show?
I don't want to undersell the city. The city's working on that with some incubators, and there's some businesses here, some ecom businesses around the town, but it's not like a tech hub of the South, if you will. That's not Mobile. So I have worked remotely here for probably the last 13 years. The last time I worked in office was 13, 14 years ago, and have been telecommuting ever since then.
Cool.
Yeah.
Normally, when I write up a little blurb for the LinkedIn post about the guest for the week, I do the LinkedIn stalking as you do. Normally I say the past 10 years or past 15 years, and I kept going back and sort of unfurling your LinkedIn profile. 15, 20. I mean, there's a lot of years in tech in there. It was really, I hadn't realized how deep you go there. Can you tell us a little bit about your background, your past? I saw some early tech stuff. I saw some agency stuff, some tech side stuff, whether it's ATG, Oracle. So can you walk us through a little bit about your background?
Yeah, I kind of cut my teeth. I worked for a technology company that we sold real-time operating systems and protocol stacks to companies that were making devices at that point in time, whether they're in telecommunications, early cell phones, digital cameras, even personal assistants like Palm Pilot back in the day, within networking equipment, so big routers and switches in the network, things that were in avionics, so like a ground proximity radar warning system, all kinds of different things, set-top boxes. So we licensed our software to these folks. It was software development. It was source code. There really was nothing to demo. And I was working with computer science engineers and electrical engineers that were way smarter than me and knew way more about software development than I ever did. And it was a fun gig. Got my teeth, cut or got into software there. But it was really like licensing this technology to device manufacturers. And at a certain point, I had one of our SE managers or our solution engineers said, "Hey, I know this guy who runs the SE team at ATG. It's in this thing called e-commerce. Do you want to come check, can you be a reference actually?" I said, "Sure, I'll be a reference for you." I said, "But hey, what is exactly is e-commerce?" Because this is like, I don't know what year, this 2007, something like that, 2008, 9. And he said, selling stuff digitally or online. I'm like, I didn't buy anything online back in those days, really, not very much. And I said, "Okay, well, that sounds interesting. So I'll be a reference for you. You have no background in that, but let's see what happens." He got the job. And then while I was on the phone with the recruiter, a guy by the name of Eric said to me, "Ali, we have a job open. Would you like a job? Would you be interested?" I said, "Yes, that sounds fantastic. Let's explore it." So that's how I got hired. I was being a reference for an SE that got hired by ATG. And then I got hired into ATG, didn't know really the first thing about e-commerce or customer service or customer experience, if you will, and just kind of fell into it at that point in time. And it was great. It was a great learning experience for me. And I loved being out of like the deep tech side and being more application. I mean, I know commerce is a platform and sort of sits between IT and the business, but there's very much an application piece to that, right? And so it was a breath of fresh air to be able to have something to demo and to pitch to business users and IT, not just the developers in the room.
Cool. And so you're with ATG. Oracle acquired ATG. You stuck around for a little bit there.
Yeah, Oracle acquired ATG, I guess 2010 timeframe, maybe 2011, and things change. You get the little fish gets swallowed by the big fish, and the culture changes, the focus changes. Big companies obviously go to market very differently than little companies, right? There's typically a matrix sales organization. You've got product specialists supporting a primary rep that has a certain subset of accounts. You go from geographies to account-based. You might have vertical teams that pitch in retail, fintech, et cetera. So it was very different. And one day our fiscal year ended like May 31st, June 1st, first day. They said, "Okay, you have a new assignment. Show up to Atlanta on Wednesday. You're going to meet your new manager." Boom. So my world changed overnight. I mean, I had about let's call it 7-8 months of Oracle where it still felt like my old ATG crew. And then, boom, the fiscal year turned, and I was given a subset of accounts. I was kind of made a prime rep, and I sold customer experience at that point in time. and had several different solutions in the bag, if you will, that I could sell. And I just didn't love it. And so a friend of mine, called her Mac, she said, hey, I know folks at General Catalyst, and I know that there's this consulting company in Boston called Optaros, and they're looking for a sales team. And I'm not going without you and a buddy of mine, Scott O'Neill. And so we said, is this real? Really? This is, you're just going to bring us to this? Because they wanted to hire her to run sales. And, next thing I know, I get a call, says, come up to Boston. You've got an interview. Jump on a plane. I go to Boston. And it was more like, here's your offer letter kind of interview, not like really interviewing. And then we went to have some lunch or, afterwards and have a cocktail, and we're talking about it. And Mac, who said, Marianne Charlton, she says to me, if you don't take this job, I'm going to come to Alabama and kick your ass. I said, okay. And
words of encouragement, really.
Words of encouragement. And to sweeten the deal, we went to one of these places. I think it's called J.R. Hook. It's in Boston, where they have all kinds of fresh seafood. We packaged up 5 2-pound lobsters in a to-go thing, a couple quarts of clam chowder, frozen, put them in this little cooler. I had to take that carry-on. I flew it all the way back home, and I'm thinking they didn't check any of the liquids. It's anyway, long story short, I've got lobsters, clawing on the styrofoam. And it was just funny. I get home, make the lobsters, and the family's like, you better take that job because we want more lobsters. So but that was great.
Taste of New England down in Mobile, right?
It was fantastic. It was a great gig. We implemented Hybris, Demandware, and Magento, and all of them before they were acquired by the bigger companies that own them now. So it was a neat time.
So you were on the tech side in sales with ATG Oracle. You got lured onto the dark side of the agency world, and you were doing consulting and sales and built out the sales team with Optaros and worked on those platforms. And then if I recall correctly, you then go, as you noted, that last platform, Magento, you went from Optaros to Magento?
I did.
Okay.
I did. It was actually at Imagine 2015, 2016, I can't remember. And I just met the new channel manager at the time, who's going to take over the Optaros account, Rachel Pfeffer, whom you know. And we just met.
Rachel Pfeffer of Now Gorgeous fame.
Of Now Gorgeous. Rachel's asking me questions about how we're going to work together, and trying to establish what our cadence is going to be, all this great stuff. And I'm just thinking, I'm probably going to be working with you over there. I just talked to who will be my manager here pretty soon, and I think the offer's coming. So it was funny. Yeah. So I got lured over to Magento in 2016, shortly after M2 came out, and Primera spun Magento out, or basically bought it from the kind of eBay enterprise days, and they spun out GSI Commerce, or that piece of eBay enterprise, to what is now Radial, and then we got spun out to Magento Commerce, and Primera put, I don't know, a couple $100 million investment in the company, and it just took off like a rocket ship. It was a fun time.
Cool. As we know, Magento then was acquired by Adobe. We recently learned globally there's no more Magento. It's now Adobe Commerce. And then about a year and a couple months, you made the decision to start something new and went over to BigCommerce, which is where you are now.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about, you seem to have this track record of joining places that are exciting, that grow, and that are very interesting to larger companies. So I'm curious, what is it about BigCommerce that was so alluring to you, and what really excited you about that move?
Well, I was really excited about a couple of things. One, SaaS. I always wanted to dabble more in SaaS. I sold some SaaS products at ATG. We had kind of a recommendations engine that was SaaS at that time that we sold, and a click to chat product that was SaaS. But I was seeing the shift in the market where people don't want to own the core code of the commerce platform, and are willing to sacrifice some flexibility to have that ease of use, ease of maintenance, not having to deal with the core code. So I think Magento is a great platform, and I think there's a lot of people that want that model, but I just kept seeing more of the market move towards something that was built SaaS from the ground up and could extend and do headless commerce, et cetera. So BigCommerce looked really appealing from that perspective, one. Two, I kind of know Dan Fertig from previous lives, and we'd stayed in touch, and he mentioned the type of impact I could have potentially on the organization coming over there. That was exciting too. And then last but not least, you mentioned kind of acquisitions. I was looking for, is there a place where we could go public? I was hoping Magento would have gone public. We all kind of knew from day one that somebody's going to buy us, because private equity firm typically doesn't, invest in you to spin you up and take you public. They usually want to sell you off. And I was excited to see sort of the strategy of where BigCommerce was, and it seemed like the CEO, Brent Bellum, wanted to go public more than he wanted to be acquired. You could get that sense or that feeling. And that was another big reason to come here. I like the technology. I like the SaaS play. I like that it's kind of as flexible, or not quite as flexible, but pretty darn flexible like Magento, but also the benefits of SaaS. And then, being part of a company that's only focused on commerce, that was really appealing. I think Adobe's a great organization. They do a lot of things really well. I prefer, let's just focus on e-commerce and not everything else.
That's great. I love how you said you always wanted to dabble in SaaS. So now you dabble in SaaS, right?
Yeah, more than dabble.
And it's interesting. You talked about sort of the evolution of the market and what merchants wanted and or needed or thought they wanted and thought they needed back in the day, and sort of how that's evolved. And we've been doing this for as an org for going on 25 years, and sort of rode that evolution of you can build whatever you want. We were a custom web app shop, .NET, Cold Fusion, ASP. Whatever you need, whatever you can dream of, we can build it with these platforms, these open source core platforms. And then as sort of the tech evolved and into these sort of these more commoditized products, like a Magento, like a Shopify, like a BigCommerce as they evolved. You still had the flexibility if you wanted it, because they were open source and you could, this on Magento, you could build what you wanted. But more and more, it had this sort of defined feature set, and it became do you want to build a platform to fit your business, or can you adjust your business to fit the platform? And what's the sort of total cost of ownership of that platform if you do it custom, or if you sort of modify your business rules to be able to sort of replicate it and scale with the platform and not have all this technical debt of customizations to the platform. So that's sort of the definitive move from open source and from custom to this sort of SaaS pre-built thing. One of the things that we really loved when we first started talking with BigCommerce, with the same Dan Fertig, was this partner-focused ecosystem, one. And two, hey, we're not trying to be everything to everybody. We're not trying to be the all-in-one solution. We are explicitly going to market as a sort of composable platform where you can do some plug and play, but you got the core pieces there that you can. The architecture is more flexible, right? It's this open SaaS, as you guys like to call it. And I think you guys were sort of very early to the, what we now call headless game. We're seeing it's all the rage in the market now. And I think there are a lot of platforms that are sort of trying to respin themselves as, we could also do a headless approach. We could also be the back end, versus a platform that came out and from the get-go and said, listen, we're built to support this. So can you tell us a little bit about where your head's at, pun intended, and sort of the headless space and this trend to headless?
Yeah, there's a lot there. So I think the whole headless thing is really interesting, but I guess where our head's at with headless.
They call you Ichabod Crane, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I think there's a lot of people that still need a tightly coupled e-commerce platform that's got its own theming framework, head, whatever you want to call it. It owns the glass. There's a lot of benefit to that. But I think the beauty of what we provide is an API first approach, where if you want to go headless, where that makes sense for you, we enable that. So almost all the platform is exposed via APIs, and then any new functionality we create, we release the API first or in conjunction with that new functionality, so that if you want to build something headless with it, you can take advantage of that feature functionality, which is really nice. So we very much believe in a world where people want choice and may need the ability to have some things owned by the commerce platform, and the commerce platform, call it, owns the glass, or there's areas of the site and or the whole experience where something else, it's a CMS or it's a custom front end That's the experience layer, and we're just feeding the commerce capabilities there. And that's where I see us going, is continuing down both paths of adding more feature functionality that's in our themes, improving the speed of our themes. Our themes are really pretty fast. We do a lot to do that. We just recently released support for accessibility in the WCAG standard there within our theme. So there's a lot that we keep investing in the themes. We added a page builder not too long ago, drop and drag WYSIWYG editor, so on and so forth. We're adding more there, but we're enabling things that can be done headless at the same time and progressing down that path. Because I used to think of it, Andrew, in terms of it only makes sense for bigger merchants. And I still think there's some validity to that. Like, where are you on your maturity curve? And does it make sense? Do you have the people to support headless? But I also think there are smaller brands that really fight on the experience. They may not have the largest or most dense catalog, if you will. Mm-hmm. Yeti Cycles comes to mind. They're a customer of ours that has a beautiful headless site. If you go take a look, they are fighting on the experience. I mean, they're not selling just any ordinary bicycle. These are amazing bikes. And on top of that, when you go to the site's a very immersive experience, and it doesn't look like your traditional web store out of the box. And I don't think they need to update their catalog every week or every other week. They're probably not doing tons of promotions. It's more about educating the consumer on the bikes that they have, on their brand, and really competing there against the other bikes and brands they compete with in the market. So for them, I don't think they're making a ton of changes to the site on a weekly basis. They don't have a ton of products to necessarily keep up with, and the experience really matters. So I think that's an example of, call it a smaller merchant or smaller company where headless makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
And seeing that more and more, right? Like, if your experience is what you're selling on, and maybe you're a digitally native brand to start out with, it might be the right play for you to go headless.
Do you feel like the pandemic accelerated the adoption of headless approaches?
It's hard to say. I don't know if it's the pandemic. It's certainly been a buzz for a while, right? We've been hearing about it for a while. And the funny thing to me is, call it for the last 13 years I've been in commerce, it's all been about putting the power in business users' hands. This shift from the CIO or the CTO's office to the CMO's office. And I mean, I think you can remember when when we first met, responsive was a big deal. Was the site responsive? Did you have a responsive framework? Like, you don't even think twice about that now, but that drove so much of it.
Yeah.
Having content management capabilities in the platform, having promotion capabilities in the platform. These things are kind of table stakes to a certain degree at this point that you expect an e-com platform. But all this was done over the past 10, 12, 15 years, whatever it is, to put power in a business user's hands to be able to manipulate the site without opening a ticket with IT. And the interesting thing is, there's so much buzz around headless, but it's like, now you've got to go open a ticket with IT unless you built out all the tooling and done it, not to say well, but invested in that tooling to make it easy for a business user. So
it makes me chuckle. I think back to when M2 rolled out, and one of the biggest features was staging and preview. Yes. Oh my God, there's staging and preview, and you can actually schedule out deployments. It's amazing. And now we fast forward to sort of, we've known for a while that for the most part, e-com platforms, cart platforms don't have the greatest CMS capabilities. That's just the world we live in. Hence the sort of move to the PWA, had moved to headless, moved to these CMS non-shopping cart technologies on your front end. And you look across the ecosystem, whether it's the Frontastics or Styler front ends or Shogun front end or what's the other one? Deity. I mean, they're popping up everywhere, and they're really good, and they're easier to use from an administrative perspective than sort of CMS platforms used to be, in terms of being able to spin up things relatively quickly and being able to maintain them at a relatively low cost ongoing. So it is pretty exciting. You start thinking about sort of the rise of the middleware ecosystem as well. Where you've got, if everything is going to be this sort of composable architecture, what's the king of the tech stack? And it feels like more and more of these middlewares are growing increasingly important.
Yeah, there's no question. It's like this enables more abstraction from the core platforms underneath. But to your point, maybe the middleware ends up being sort of the one thing that's the stickiest in the whole stack for everyone. I think COVID certainly accelerated the demand for e-commerce, right? We've all seen that. There's no question about that. Whether it's accelerated headless, that's a tough one to say. I just think more brands are realizing that either they have the capacity to deploy it and it makes sense for them, and they need to compete, so they're doing it, or they're like, everyone's at least investigating it to some level. Like, they're thinking about it at some level, whether they're ready for it today or 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now.
Yeah, and you look at sort of the pandemic, especially for those merchants who had brick and mortar and an online presence, and all of a sudden there is no brick and mortar, and there are those folks who used to go shop in the store. So if you want to talk about sort of the move to digital, we've always in digital trying to give our best approximation of the brand experience, right? Bring that in-store experience online and make them feel like they are touching, feeling, looking at the product. So all of a sudden you have people shopping online who may not have always shopped online with your brand, and you're trying to really accelerate the bridging of that gap to make them still feel like it's the same brand in store and online. To that extent, I feel like there may have been an acceleration there. Other areas we've seen subscription just absolutely skyrocketing. Curious sort of where you guys are in that conversation. I know you've got some really good, strong subscription partners in the space, but have you seen the same on BigCommerce?
We do. We have several different subscription partners, tons of opportunities around subscription. So it's still a big driver. I think like everyone's moved their own business to some sort of subscription service, no matter who it is. You figure that out for Overdose, so maybe there's it'll revolutionize the services industry. But we're seeing a lot of that still. That's still a pretty big driver, is subscriptions across the board for sure.
On the topic of potentially bizarre subscriptions, we watched this show called Taskmaster. It's this British show where they get these comedians to go compete doing these ridiculous tasks. They film them, they edit them down, they sort of rank them how well they did these tasks. And each episode, the first task is a prize task where they're supposed to bring in some ridiculous prize based on what the category is. And one of them was best subscription. So they each brought in whatever they thought the best subscription was. One was a subscription to some sort of rail magazine. One was a monthly cheese subscription. One was a monthly grilled cheese subscription. And one guy brought in a subscription that was to the National Cloud Society, where every day he gets a picture of a cloud emailed to him. It's supposed to be sort of a cathartic experience. So we're at the point now where people are selling a cloud subscription, not a technical cloud, but a literal
cloud.
So that was funny.
Here's some serious clouds. Take a look. They're great. They're amazing. Yeah,
are amazing.
I don't know. Like, everything's a subscription.
Yeah,
I dig it. I just hate managing my own subscriptions. It's a pain. There's things I haven't used that in 2 years, and I'm still paying whatever $5 a month for it. I need to get rid of it.
Sorry, are you suggesting that there's a possibility that when I signed up for Starz, HBO, Cinemax, Hoopla, and Acorn on Amazon for that $7.99 trial month, that I might not have canceled those last year?
You may not have. You may be paying a lot more than you think.
Probably check. But yeah, it's easy in, and then you just sort of forget about it unless you sort of look at your statement monthly and go, yep. Whoops.
Exactly. Yep. 100%. It's funny. There's an analogy there, I think, man. Like, the whole notion of cutting the cord in cable, right? Everyone's like, oh, I got to cut the cord. I want a la carte services or a la carte channels. I want to be able to pick. I only want this, like maybe just ESPN and maybe just HBO and this and that. And so we kind of start getting that. And then the next thing you know, we have some streaming service. Everyone's got a streaming service. They want to charge you 5, 7, 10, whatever bucks per month. And where I thought I was going to save a bunch of money by cutting the cord, well, I'm right back to where I was with all these streaming services, because when I try to add all the channels I want, it ends up being the same. I kind of feel like headless.
Are you suggesting that in the e-commerce space, people move to an all-in-one solution and then they start wanting single, standalone, best-in-class solutions, and then they get tired of that and they start moving back to a single solution?
Yeah, well, or like in the headless analogy, it's like, oh, these things are coupled tightly. I want to cut the cord, so let's get away. Let's decouple these things. Let's have composable commerce. Let's move to something along those lines. And you start doing all that work, and it's kind of like, yeah, there's tons of great, let's say, toolings out there. CMSs Contentful, Shogun, you name it, tons of them that are out there. And then you look at people wanting to do different frameworks or different things that they can plug into the experience. And once you start a la carting a ton, that gets in. That's an interesting thing too when you're looking at headless, right? There's a similar analogy there with you've got a lot of subscriptions you're managing now. So I guess just tying back to the whole headless conversation, I think it's a really interesting thing. I think it makes a lot of sense for a lot of folks, but I still think for the vast majority, you just need to pick your cable provider. You need a platform with a good head that's included with it.
Pick your package.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So what else have you seen in the space that is exciting to you?
I think this whole AR VR thing is pretty cool. We have a partner, 3Kit. I don't know if you're familiar.
Yeah, no, we had Hillary Murdoch on a few weeks ago.
Oh, Hillary's great. Yeah. I just think that's amazing. The things that they're doing with apparel, with furniture, that they can do with B2B. I mean, when B2B companies really start using the kind of tools that are out there for B2C merchants, I know they have B2B customers, but I think the ability to take a automotive part, spin it around and look at it and see it from all angles is kind of an interesting proposition. But that AR VR thing is a whole other level of providing a better experience, in my opinion, across the board.
Are you a closet motorhead? Did I not know this about you?
I am not. I'm music, yes. Guitars and amps, yes. Cars, I can change a tire. That's about it. Maybe
to your point about the techs like 3Kit, we, like many people during the pandemic, realized we hated our couch and we hated our bed and we hated a lot of stuff about our apartment. So the homewares is really accelerated online. But when you're buying a couch, that's a pretty, it's a pricey investment. It's also not easy to return if you're not going to like it. So this whole, how does it look in my room? Let me see what this green couch looks like against my gray wall. We're seeing a lot of really great engagement on the AR VR front. We're actually talking with this really cool tech. I think they're called, and I hope I get it right, I think they're called Forma. They do AR try-ons, right? You can upload your picture, and then it will render that item that you're looking at onto your body, so you can see what it actually looks like on you. And it's pretty cool. This virtual try-on thing is a really interesting area. So we're pretty excited about that.
It is, man. When they get to the point where, and a long time ago, I don't know, this is probably 5-6 years ago, I read an article where I think it was Samsung was trying to patent the ability to build touch screens that I guess would oscillate or vibrate at different frequencies to simulate different fabrics.
Wow.
So you could say, check out this corduroy pants, and just be like, okay, yes, it's corduroy or whatever. Look at the blend on this shirt and get a sense for what it feels like. That would be pretty impressive. If we get something that takes the experience to that level where you can actually somewhat touch and feel, not only just see what it might look like on you through AR, VR, but get a better sense of what the texture is and how that could feel, I think that takes e-commerce to a whole nother level at that point. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that it happens in the next, 10 years. Who knows?
I don't doubt it at all. If you think about sort of remote, surgery, right? Where you've got hands that do surgery and you're controlling them remotely. And you think about, if you have some sort of malleable thing that can be manipulated digitally to, show curves or bumps or spikes, that's some Black Mirror stuff.
We need to make it, and then
very cool.
I think the other thing, headless is huge. Channels, selling through different channels, so social media, the different marketplaces. It's just you almost can't fight Amazon and Walmart and the others out there. Certainly, you need to have your brand listed on all the social channels, and having tight integrations to things like Facebook and Instagram and Amazon and Walmart. Those are things that we've released here not too long ago. We've improved our ability to serve our customers and give them the ability to syndicate their products onto different channels and sell across those channels. And one of two platforms that are initially launched to have Instagram checkout. And so I see that as something that's becoming more and more popular, where the commerce platform is kind of this hub to push out products to other channels. And I used to think that bigger brands, larger brands would use, call it a channel advisor or Feednomics, and they would never use the commerce platform to do that. But we're seeing even bigger brands, want the ability to manage some of that from the core commerce platform. So that's an area where seeing some interesting things happen. And then really the interesting thing too with like consumer packaged goods companies, they're all trying to go direct to consumer right now, or have been, right? And this ability to test and learn and spin up a site really quickly, deploy it in a matter of weeks, couple of weeks, 3 weeks, not months, and see if commerce is going to work for that particular brand before you invest a lot. That's something that we see quite a bit. And I think that's another new frontier, right? There's a ton of these companies that have never gone direct to consumer, and they need to test it before they invest a ton of cash. And so I think a SaaS play makes a ton of sense, because you can do something like that with BigCommerce really quickly. And then if the business takes off, you can extend it with our platform and it scales with you. So we see quite a bit of that as well, Andrew.
Interesting to your point about sort of the channel and channel management and all that, which is, certainly on the rise as well with the pandemic. I feel like, we used to hear CDPs and PIMs and DAMs, once in a while. And while they're not in every project now, I feel like every project is at least discussed. It's asked about by the merchant, it's asked about by tech partners, because we're just seeing more of it. You need to manage your stuff if it's going out across all these different channels. And then your other point about the D2C for traditionally B2B brands, it is remarkable how much these brands are learning about their consumers that they never knew. When you sell through a Walmart, a CVS, a what have you, Kroger, you have Publix down there in Alabama?
Yeah.
You never talk to your end customer, right? You do focus groups and you try and figure it out. But unless you have that data, unless you're selling directly to them, you don't really ever get that data. And it's remarkable what these brands are learning about their consumers to help them with product development, to help them with distribution, help them with understanding what part of the country they should be selling what products in, and what warehouse they should be resourcing it from. So it's really fascinating to see all this stuff unfolding. And I think, part of it certainly was pandemic related, when folks are like, shoot, if I need to get, a 24 pack of Arizona iced tea, I don't want to go to the store because I could spontaneously combust when I walk outside. That's how you felt a year ago, right?
Right.
You start saying, I want to buy it online, and I want to buy it direct if I can, or at the cheapest possible price for heavy CPG products. But yeah.
The funny thing about that to me is the one kind of pet peeve I guess I have is that, and you just hit the nail on the head, you're spinning up this brand to sell whatever. Let's say you're a multi-billion-dollar, brand that sells to these big box retailers. You don't have a relationship with your customer. You want to establish that relationship with the customer and learn more about them. And your end goal is not necessarily to do hundreds of millions or millions through your ecom channel. You might have channel conflicts you're worried about, etc. If you can get it, great, I guess, right? But I think a lot of them are it's more about the insights, having that relationship, so that, call it this $2, $3, $4, $5 million e-commerce, $10 million e-commerce site that you have influences the billions of dollars that you generate through your other channels, right? That's what you're really talking about here. The thing that always shocks me is how little those brands want to invest in the e-com channel to start it out. And while I think you can spin up an e-commerce store really quickly with us, you can spin up an e-commerce store really quickly with some other platforms that are out there, I would say that this is not, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, where it's the field of dreams. If you build it, they will come. No, you've got to invest in it, have a great experience when you build it, and drive people to it, or you're not going to see a lot of gains from it.
Yeah.
So all that to say, I would love for these bigger brands or folks that are going direct to consumer to invest a little more, right? Think about the strategy a little bit and put a little more into it than they have been, because they're just looking at it as like, well, we're just going to learn and get insights. But those insights are going to power so much more and drive so much more value for you.
I mean, just improving supply chain alone, understanding where you want to be sending certain products. Mm-hmm. Certain markets are hot, and they're you don't have to wait for the feedback from the big boxers telling you we're out of stock, we need to re-up. You sort of get ahead of it and head it off with the pass, as it were. Very cool stuff. Any final closing words as we wrap up this 45th broadcast of Overdose and Chill with Ali from BigCommerce?
I'm just excited to be talking with you, and I'm hoping we get to see each other in person here soon. That feels like we're getting out of the pandemic, and I'm just ready to see all of the folks in the industry and in our community and be out there, get to hang a little bit in person. Excited to get back in front of customers if and when that will happen, because that brings me, and I know a lot of the other folks that are in our space, a lot of energy, right, when you're actually in the room. So as much as I love all the virtual stuff, I can't wait to get back to in person, and I'm hoping that happens for us all here soon, Andrew.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you ever think you'd say I miss going to Vegas? I never thought I'd say that. But yeah, it's been a brutal year on a lot of fronts. One of the things that's hit me hardest is that we haven't been able to see, our ecosystem friends and folks, and certainly always I'm used to seeing you every couple of months, at least every year. So definitely miss seeing you and hanging out. Looking forward to the next one. I think IRCE or Retail X is on end of August. It's supposed to be on, at least now, in person up there in Chicago.
So be there. Yeah, you're gonna be there.
I will be there, and hopefully you'll be there as well. But
I will be there.
To grabbing a drink and grabbing a meal with you soon, man.
Awesome, man. Looking forward to it.
Cool. Thanks for joining. Really appreciate it, and we'll chat soon.
Thanks for having me.